Scientists surely have a special responsibility. It is their ideas that form the basis of new technology. However, if they are unethical, then the crisis or problem arises. Today we will be doing a lesson related to an unethical or unprofessional scientist. This lesson describes the story of a brilliant scientist, Griffin, who degenerated or degraded himself into a lawless person. Let's watch further to find out what happens. But before that, let me introduce you to the author. Herbert George Wells was an English writer. Prolific in many genres, he wrote dozens of novels, short stories, and works on social commentary, history, satire, biography, and autobiography. Come, let's watch one of his stories titled Footprints Without Feet. This is the last lesson for term 1, and it deals with the outcome of anger, greed, and power. Hence, without wasting time, let us all shift our focus towards the story. In the beginning of the lesson, we find two boys who suddenly notice a few muddy imprints of bare feet. They start wondering as to what a barefoot man was doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London. They also started thinking as to where the man was, since he was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly they saw another footmark, and the man was still not visible. So, out of curiosity, they started following the footprints until the footprints became invisible. They actually had been following a scientist who had discovered how to make the human body invisible. It was Griffin the scientist who had been working really hard to make himself invisible. One day, his hard work paid off since he actually became invisible by consuming certain drugs. Like they say, a person's sense of morality lessens as his power increases. Likewise, Griffin now suddenly had this urge to avenge his wrongdoer, who was his landlord and who had always wanted to kick Griffin out of his house. He went back to his rented apartment and burnt down the landlord's house. In order to save himself from being seen and caught, he removed his clothes, became invisible, and ran off. But being naked in the cold month of January was a very bad idea. After a long walk, he slipped into a big London store for warmth. When everything was closed, Griffin explored the shop, clothed and fed himself without regard to the expenses. He found himself perfect clothes, and in the kitchen of the restaurant, he found cold meat and coffee, and later followed up with sweets and wine, and fell asleep on a pile of quilts. He got up late, and when he saw assistants of the store approaching, he panicked and began to run. They chased him until he became invisible once again by removing all his clothes. Now being completely naked and cold, he decided to try the stock of a theatrical company, where he found all the bandages, glasses, false nose, bushy whiskers, a large hat, and not to forget clothes. He also attacked a shopkeeper from behind and robbed him of all the money he could find. eager to get away from the crowded town. He boarded a train to the village of Iping and booked 2 rooms at a local inn. The arrival of a stranger in winter was unusual, plus his uncommon appearance tempted Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife, to make every effort to be friendly. And she was rudely told that since he was there for solitude, he did not wish to be disturbed in any way at any cost. Satisfied that he was a scientist who had paid her in advance, she excused his irritable temper. But now, after some days, the stolen money he did not last long, and Griffin pretended that his check was to arrive that day, and then he would pay his dues. Afterwards, a strange episode occurred, whereby a clergy and his wife were awakened by noises in the study room. Thinking there was a thief, the clergyman took a poker, flung open the door to catch the thief red-handed. However, the room was empty, and they had been robbed of their housekeeping money, which they found it very strange. The same day, the landlord and his wife were up early and were surprised to see Griffin's door, which was mostly locked and shut, wide open. Tempted, they peeped inside, and seeing that the room was unkempt and Griffin missing, they decided to investigate. Suddenly, Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. The hat which hung on the bedpost suddenly leapt up itself and dashed into her face. The chair sprang into the air and charged straight at her and pushed them both out of the room, and then shut and locked the door from inside. Mrs. Hall was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the scientist had somehow caused those spirits to enter into her furniture. She thought of the chair that her mother used to sit on and the same chair that had risen up against her now. When the news of the burglary at the clergyman's study spread like wildfire, everyone started suspecting the strange scientist. This suspicion grew stronger when he produced money instead of check, like he had himself mentioned earlier. The village constable was then called for, but Mrs. Hall, who did not have patience to wait, barged into his room and asked him what he had been doing upstairs to her chair and furniture. She also asked him how he came out of the empty bedroom or entered the locked bedroom. This made Griffin furious, and so he decided to teach them a lesson. He shouted back angrily and removed his bandages, whiskers, spectacles, and his nose. It took him a minute to do so, and the people in the bar were horrified as they looked at a headless man. Mr. Jaffers, the village constable, was surprised as he realized that he had to arrest a headless man. But Jaffers, being a dutiful constable, knew that the magistrate wanted him to arrest the man with or without the head. However, as Griffin started throwing his clothes one after another, he was nowhere to be seen, and that left Jaffers struggling to arrest a man who had completely become invisible. The scene was chaotic as the villagers who were helping him to arrest this invisible man were hit by blows from nowhere. As Jaffers made his last attempt to catch hold of Griffin, he was knocked unconscious by him. Everybody was frantically shouting, "Hold him!" repeatedly, but Griffin set himself free from them, leaving the whole lot of villagers in a confused frame of mind, since no one knew how to catch him. And as for Griffin, well, he came out of the inn and walked on the road and was again a free man. And And now we come to the end of this extract taken from the science fiction The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. If you all are tempted to know what happens next, then you will have to either wait till you reach grade 12, since this novel is a part of their English syllabus, or you will have to borrow this book from one of your seniors. So happy reading and take care until I upload a new video from our term 2 lessons. Bye.